shoot on sight anyone in the streets. And these men obey such orders. This is Nicaragua under martial law. The army stands guard over the ruins of a country, ruins which bear witness to a national mutiny against a dictatorship so bereft of alternative solutions that it chose to bomb its own cities. Yet the nation is now more united and more committed to rebellion than ever. These are the citizens of Masaya, one of the cities which rose up against President Somoza. Nicaragua's Archbishop, Miguel Obando, is here to give them comfort. The people of Nicaragua suffered greatly when Somoza turned on them. And the Archbishop is on their side. Once the Catholic Church supported the regime, now Church and state are in bitter struggle. Now the Archbishop demands in public that Somoza should go. The people are still in shock, remembering the soldiers on the rampage, looting and burning, the terror, the torture, the murder. And the army took the war into the churches. During the rebellion, priests were dragged from their altars and beaten up by the soldiers. The memory of what happened in the cities which rebelled last month is still sharp and bitter in the mind. The battle for Esteli left most of the center of the city in ruins. Under the rubble, dead bodies buried by the air raids. According to the Red Cross, more than 2,000 men, women and children were slaughtered in the assault on Esteli. The death toll throughout Nicaragua, 5,000, even more. In the face of international condemnation, the regime has ordered a rapid clear-up. It has, however, failed to disguise the extent of the misery it's caused. The soldiers survey a hostile city. Those few who remain in Esteli out of a population of more than 40,000 queue for relief handed out to them by the same regime which destroyed their means of existence. The young men of Esteli have taken to the hills to join the guerrillas. The people who remain dare not speak openly, but tell you in urgent whispers, "We are with the guerrillas, all of us. That's what the world must know. It's the truth." Not only in Esteli, but in 9 other main towns and cities of Nicaragua, there's devastation like this. As Somoza's army administered the most terrible punishment to the citizens of this country. A small country of 2 million people brought to its knees. A small country which is far away and therefore about which perhaps it's tempting to say, yes, isn't this dreadful, but does it really matter to the rest of the world? A tin pot dictator, a banana republic, what else do you expect? Well, even to those cynics, Nicaragua should matter. For what is happening here is causing the deepest anxiety to the most powerful nation in the Western world, the United States of America. Nicaragua is one of the straggle of countries which form Central America. Bounded on one side by the Pacific and on the other by the Atlantic, Central America is an area of political, economic and strategic importance for the United States. In their search for stability here, the presence of Cuba, only a few hundred miles from the mainland, has long been used by Washington to justify American support for the vicious dictatorships which disfigure this part of the world. The uprising in Nicaragua has alarmed and embarrassed the White House. Embarrassment over human rights, alarm over instability in Central America. On the surface, nothing's changed. The dictator's trigger-happy troops still race the streets, protecting their president from his people. He remains in his bunker, now isolated and deserted at last by America, anxious if unrepentant. Are you satisfied with the performance of your National Guard in the last month, in the last fighting?
If we consider victory Success? Yes.
Do you have no qualms about the means by which that success has been achieved?
I could have done it in a less painful way, but the circumstances made it so that we had to act that way.
How do you mean?
Well, if I would have had 5,000 additional men under arms, we could have taken our time.
You've said, I think I'm right, that the exercise that you were engaged in was to protect the people of Nicaragua. From the outside, bombing seems a rather curious form of protection. Could you explain why you decided to do that?
In the first place, let me say this. To maintain the peace of the country is a way of protecting the people. Neutralizing those who break the peace is also a form of protecting the people. Therefore, we have been forced to utilize certain arms to, shall we say, create the conditions in isolated spots so that our troops could go by, and for that reason we've had to use on-the-spot rocket fire to get snipers out of the way.
If the fighting starts again, if the popular mood erupts, or if the rebels start attacking you again, are you prepared to use the same means that you have just used to win that struggle?
It all depends upon the attitude of whoever uses the force.
You're prepared to use the same kind of force in principle again?
That's the only one I have.
Somoza's force is called the National Guard. 8,000 men obedient to the Somoza family. The president is their commander-in-chief, his brother their officer-in-charge, his son the head of their training school. For the 45 years in which they've ruled Nicaragua, the Somoza family has used this force as a private army to terrorize the population. And for most of those 45 years, the Somoza troops have been funded, equipped, and trained by the United States. It was not until this summer that an American president finally decided to confront the National Guard by cutting off all military aid to Somoza. It was the beginning of the end of a long affair. The Somozas form a dynasty stretching back to 1933, when the Americans put the first Somoza in power. Until then, they'd run Nicaragua with the Marines. Of this Somoza, Roosevelt said, "Yes, he sure is a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch." The statue of an American Marine stands guard over his tomb. The old man had been assassinated, but since he hadn't been above arranging a death or two himself, no one was surprised. No surprise either that he was succeeded by his son Luis, and when he died, the new president naturally was another Somoza, his brother, promising peace, work and progress. But peace there was not, nor work, nor progress. The mass of the people still endure unspeakable poverty, disease, malnutrition, illiteracy, unemployment, blighted lives. The seeds of upheaval flourished in the slums of Nicaragua. Not simply communism, as the dictator claims, but natural rebellion against the intolerable. Now, after the uprising, the people fear to speak, except in secret.
We are deadly afraid. We are completely, how can I say, paralyzed over the thought of the guards coming into our homes. And we have no means of expressing our ideas. We are censured, we are persecuted, we are killed just for anything. Witnesses have seen with their own eyes how they have killed men, women, and children. What they have nominated as Operation Cleanup consists in this. They go into the homes, they drag the men out, they take them into the streets, and they kill them. I just spoke to a woman who saw them this morning when the action happened. Some of them were tortured, and afterwards they were killed.
The capital has spread into the suburbs. There, land speculation made vast profits for a handful of the elite. Already, the dictator was the richest man in Central America, sharing the ownership of the nation's wealth with foreign, mainly American investors. After the earthquake, Somoza got even richer. and he is now worth some $500 million. The corruption and unfair competition of those years enraged his rivals in business, who began to turn on a dictator who had crowded them out. Now, the great majority of the rich and powerful seek his overthrow, and this year have led the workers in 2 prolonged general strikes against the regime. Only a small group of protected cronies is still loyal to the president, enjoying every privilege, like cars. The president owns the franchise to import Mercedes-Benz. He also levies the import tax on foreign goods. On Mercedes, 100% usually. But the loyal are exempt. They pay no tax and are thus able to drive the Somoza car on Somoza roads, which are laid with Somoza bricks designed in Somoza style, made by Somoza workers in a Somoza factory. And public resistance to this is dangerous. Much of the old Somoza palace was destroyed in the earthquake, but it still fulfills a traditional role in the life of this nation. This is one of the torture centres in a country notorious for such crimes. And no one is immune. This is the boardroom of INDI, Nicaragua's CBI. Half the board members are now underground or in jail. The chief executive believes he's in danger and sleeps in a different house each night. His account of what happened to a business colleague arrested by the police a few weeks ago explains why.
And I can give you the name of Gustavo Adolfo Arguello Hurtado, who was put in prison about 3 weeks ago, a healthy man, and 3 days later, their body was lying in his house because he died.
They brought the dead body back to the house?
Of course.
What had happened to him?
Well, nobody knows what happened, but you can take your own conclusion when you have a healthy man going into prison and 3 days later coming dead. I mean, you take your own conclusions.
Your conclusion?
My conclusion is that he got killed in prison.
What is the attitude of the business community towards the Sandinistas, the guerrillas?
We think that, these are young men, groups who want to do something and change this country. I think that the opposition to Somoza is so strong that we can live with them.
Somoza has always said that without him there'd be communism here. It's evident that you, the business community, simply don't believe that.
Somoza, by solely remaining in power, foments communism. I think that by not giving the opportunity to the people to express his position in a free election, I think that by not opening his to other political parties, I think by not giving the people an opportunity to have a proper home and a good shelter and good education, by doing that, he foments communism. But as particularly right now, I don't think that that's a problem. This is a war against Somoza, so it's an all-over war. The Sandinistas do their war by doing fighting in the street and so forth. The private sector plays its own war by closing their shops and their businesses because they don't have guns and arms. And the church put up its own war by clearly establishing their own position. And the situation right now is a very clear one. Maybe Somoza has won what we can call a military battle, but he has lost the political, economical, and moral war.
The Americans too have turned on Somoza. The embassy in Nicaragua is no longer an ally. Not so much because the dictatorship is cruel or corrupt, it was ever thus, but because it no longer provides stability, but instead provokes upheaval in Central America. So the Americans are now pressing Somoza to stand down. Isn't it your problem that the Americans now believe, in effect, that you've got to go, that they will no longer continue to support you in power?
As far as I've heard officially, the United States is not in favor of my overthrow.
Your departure, I said.
That's my overthrow.
Because
if I depart by force, I'm doing it against my will.
If the Americans come in here and say, we are no longer going to support you, you have to go so far as we're concerned.
I would like for them to tell me that, because then they would make me a hero in Latin America.
And you want to be a hero in Latin America?
Not necessarily, but I'm telling you what you're proposing, what it would mean, the implications.
I would have thought that your main supporters in Latin America at the moment were your fellow dictators, with respect.
Not necessarily.
You won't step down?
Because it's not a matter of personal choice. I was voted by a popular vote for a certain amount of time, and I am, by Constitution, bound to uphold the Constitution.
You say Constitution. It's a Constitution you created, and the Americans certainly believe is one that is upheld by force on the one hand, and the votes that you gain to keep yourself in control are rigged votes on the other, and that's virtually the official American line, isn't it?
I am afraid that you are misinformed. You don't know enough about this country to make the statements you're saying.
I'm reporting American feeling.
But you should check out what you're saying. The Americans are wrong too. They're not the owners of the truth.
People outside this country are struck by the fact that very established conservative forces are now against you, namely the church and the business community, both of whom appear to believe that your regime has been both cruel and corrupt. It is curious, isn't it, that you should find these conservative forces united against you in this way?
No. Our party is a liberal party, and we have been continually against those forces. So whether we have good relations with them is one thing, and whether they become violent is another, but it's the same fight.
The established church?
Yes.
The Catholic Church?
Yes.
Everyone in this country, according to your account, Mr. President, appears to be politicized, wrong, ignorant, except for yourself. Could it not be that they are right and you are wrong?
Well, that's very nice of you to call me ignorant. But I don't take that. There are other sectors of the country that have not gone on strike, that look at the country as a positive situation, that you seem to be blind and you don't see it yourself. Open your eyes.
Mr. President, I see destruction, fear, and death, and you determined to stay on despite it. Is that a correct view as well?
In this ideological fight that there is in the world today, I see destruction, fear, and death all over the world.
And you don't mind it being here?
Because we're not the only ones who have it.
Martial law continues. Somoza stays on, determined to strengthen the National Guard. A quandary for America. Somoza must go. But how? Not the Marines, not the CIA. What else? An economic squeeze? A blockade? Perhaps. A public call by Carter that in the name of human rights the dictator should depart? Possible. But what if he still resists? In the capital, the regime waits for the guerrillas, clearing the main roads of undergrowth of cover. For there's no longer much doubt that the people of Nicaragua will rise up again and again until Somoza goes. America's anxiety springs from the knowledge that if he stays, the war won't stop. And then, the conflict in Nicaragua could become contagious, prompting similar uprisings in the neighboring dictatorships, San Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, the domino theory in Central America. And since the states of this region are closely linked, the Americans fear that countries like Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, or Venezuela could be dragged into the struggle against the dictators. Upheaval throughout Central America, endangering the strategic and economic interests of the United States, from the vital military base at the Panama Canal up to the gigantic oil and gas deposits in Mexico. It's a prospect which makes the American search for peace in Nicaragua a matter of urgency. In one of those countries bordering Nicaragua, in an old secluded house, leaders of the uprising are waiting. Here, the guerrillas meet with those who support them and finance their war. Not communists from Cuba, but businessmen and lawyers, nationalists from Nicaragua. Here, left unites with right, rich with poor. The opposition has no clear leaders yet, but they do have more arms and more men. The guerrillas nominate as their spokesman the group of 12, middle-class liberals, heroes in Nicaragua, and they are adamant. If Somoza says, yes, I'll talk, we'll lift martial law, lift censorship, but I can't talk on the assumption that I'm going to depart, what will your response be?
That will be the end of it.
It's as simple as that?
It's right. There's no use to going ahead with anything.
Before you start talking, you have to have it made clear to you that Somoza is going at the end of the talks.
Right.
directly?
Yes.
Not in a year's time or 18 months'
No.
time?
No,
6
because-
months' time?
Because Somoza is not guaranteed to the peace of the country.
If he then goes, does that mean the war stops?
Yeah, the fighting will stop. Yeah, and then we'll have a mediation or dialogue among the political organization, all the opposing parties, including the group of the 12.
But the guerrilla war would stop?
Yes, under those conditions, yes.
And if Somoza doesn't go?
We'll keep on fighting.
I'm pretty sure about that.
Yes.
Sorry?
The war.
I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah, the war will continue.
The anguish of Nicaragua is not yet over. The oppression persists, the fear and the anger, the certainty that the dictator must and will be brought down. The young men are in the hills in hiding, waiting to return. No one knows how many there now are, where they are, or when they'll be back. That they will return is beyond any doubt.